Okay, like this lecture is going to be totally radical because it's all about radicals. Like, oh my God, radical sign. That is so like radical. Sometimes they have a plus minus in front of the radical sign. Um, Not always. But what we want to talk about here is quadratic equations, really. We're introducing quadratic equations, and when we do that, I'm losing my Valley Girl accent. Um, but like it's like totally like quadratic equations are different than linear equations because linear equations, like, they only have like a couple of terms. Like, they have a y term and an x term and a constant. They look like that. Y equals like mx plus b. I mean, totally like 3x plus 7 equals 20 or 210 or whatever. Um, you've got, well, that one doesn't have a y in it. You could just say y equals 3x plus 7. And that would be like totally cool linear equation. But then when you add an x squared term to it, that's when you're like, oh, now I've got a quadratic equation. Quadratic equations, like, you can totally write them like x squared plus 3x plus 9. Oh my God, my handwriting is like awful, like totally ratchet, right? Like, I can't even look at it. Anyway, you might have y equals x squared plus 3x plus 9, and that would be like a quadratic function. Or you might have it be an equation, and it'd be like x squared plus 3x plus 9 equals 2 or 0 or anything, but just makes, and it's just like with linear equations, just totally like with linear equations up here. Remember, I could have 3x equals 21. That's a linear equation that I can solve. Or I could have like 3x equals y, and that's like a linear equation I can graph. So if there's two variables, you graph it, and if there's one variable, you solve it. And same thing with quadratic equations over here, but it's with an x squared. Not an x cubed, no, not x to the fourth power, it's just with x squared. So we're going to solve equations with x squared in them. Okay, so let's start with the easy ones, right? So erase, erase, erase everything. Ugh, this whiteboard is just so totally slow. I can't even, I have no patience for it. Um, let's start with an easy one, such as like x squared equals, I don't know, like 4. Um, so it's obvious what you do, right? Like, well, I mean, you know what x is. Like, it's totally 2, right? But that's because like 2 is it's this word, right? That you have for a thing that we don't know what it is. Um, what you're doing when you to get to that 4, the word, like what you're doing to it, it's radical. I mean, radical sign is what you put on it, but it's called taking the square root. Like, because 2 squared is 4, so the square root of 4 is 2. So I took the square root of both sides. Okay? So it's just like you got to be able to do it both ways. Like when your number is getting bigger, you're squaring it. So 2 squared is 4. So that's how you say it. 2 squared is 4. There's no root in that statement. My accent gets really British because it's because like when I was 9, my mom took me to like the British island of Jamaica, and I learned to speak, you know, that's probably affected my English speaking, and so I kind of have an English accent. I mean, something like that. So the square root of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. The square root of 4 is 2, like totally. But then, simple, right? The only thing that you got to be careful about, I mean, this is just the thing, is that, so if x squared equals 4, then, like, yeah, x is 2, but there's like another answer. There totally is, okay? It's like not just 2, it's also maybe minus 2. Did you think about that? That could, like, totally be 2 or minus 2. I mean, think about it. It's true, right? Okay, but okay, here's the thing. Like, and this is just the thing. Um, that makes sense for x squared equals 4 is easy, right? So x equals 2 or negative 2. quadratic equations usually have two solutions. It's just like that, okay? But not always, okay? But like if x squared equals 0, there's like only one solution for that, right? It's just a 0 because it's not like there's a positive or negative 0. So that's one case where it has one solution. Um, and sometimes the solution, it's like x squared equals 3, and that's like, I don't know what the square root of 3 is. I can't even, like, my calculator doesn't have enough digits because it just goes on forever. So I just leave it in radical form, okay? Like x is plus or minus the square root of 3. And if the problem is x squared equals 30, then I would do plus or minus the square root of 30, but I have to make sure that I leave it in simplest radical form. And if you want to know what simplest radical form is, you totally need to watch this boring video that I made using an American boring teacher's accent and find out how to put it in simplest radical form. You'd have to make sure there's no perfect squares that go into that. Like, does 4 go into 30? Because if it does, it's totally not simplest form. So, like, anyway. But that has two solutions again, right? Like, two totally solutions. Okay, but then this is the thing that, like, you need to understand for this, is that, and this is where this is, like, a little bit mind-blowing. I'm just warning you, right? I mean, I'm just warning you is all I'm doing. The thing is that what if I have x squared equals negative 9? And I had to think, like, well, what number squared is negative 9? Like, what's the square root of negative 9, right? It would just be the square root of negative 9, plus or minus. But, okay. Well, I know what the square root of 9 is, right? So maybe I could, like, factor it. So, like, that means, like, break it down into things that it multiplies to. So it would be like x is plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times 9. And that times the square root of 9, like, sorry. So that's like, and that's like totally 3. So it's plus or minus 3 times the square root of negative 1, but, whoa. But what the hell is the square root of negative 1? Oh my gosh, totally, excuse me. My parents totally say I swear too much. I'm going to hell. I totally am. Anyway, the square root of negative 1. What is that? Well, I mean, is 1 times its squared negative equal to 1 squared equals 1, and negative 1 squared equals 1. So the square root of 1 is 1 or negative 1, but I don't know what squared is negative 1. X squared, what the hell squared is negative 1? Oh my god, excuse me, I'm so sorry. It's just terrible. Alright, x squared equals negative 1. What is that? Well, there is none, right? It's just impossible, but, like, it's just complicated because they decided after a few years, like, they had to make something up. They just, like, we're gonna make something up. Like, we don't want this question to have no answer. We have to make something up. So they totally did. They're like, okay, the thing that is squared is negative 1. We're just gonna call it I. We're just gonna say, like, it's not even a number. It's like a letter. So I is the square root of negative 1. Isn't that, like, weird? So then the square root of negative 9 is plus or minus 3i. And that's what a complex number is like. It's like, and that's what you have to, I guess that's what, like, we're supposed to know about it or something. And I'm going to erase this again. You better pause it or whatever if you're going to copy it down. God, just use your pause button. Jesus Christ. Okay. So I got that. I basically explained that, I think. But then you got to think about it. Okay, so if I is the square root of negative 1, then, like, I squared is when this times itself, well, that equals, like, negative 1, right? And then, like, I cubed equals, like, negative 1 times the square root of negative 1, which is, like, negative the square root of negative 1. Like, whoa, right? And then I to the 4th power is like totally equal to -1 times -1, which is just like 1. So you gotta understand, I mean, that's like kind of what it's saying. It's kind of what so anyway, like, you know how, like there's totally like, um, real numbers, which are like all the numbers that we, all the like the real, all, those are just like numbers, everything. That includes rational and irrational, like, I mean, like both. And then it also includes whole number, whole numbers of type are rational, they're totally rational. So like, you kind of get that, I think. And then you have these imaginary numbers that we just did, like I, and -I, and like 3i, and like 5i, and whatever I. Those are all imaginary numbers. So like, what a complex number is, like a combination of them, like in a, like this. It's like totally like 5 plus 3i, or like 7 minus 2i. I mean, that's just how you say it. You usually put the real part first, and then the complex part like after. So like, it's like a, a tree of terms, or like a family tree or whatever. Like, the real numbers go underneath the complex, and so do the imaginary. They're both part of complex numbers. Complex numbers are like real and imaginary combined. Anyway, like, you always want to simplify them so that they're put in this form. They call it the a plus bi form. And if you're adding them together, it's easy. You just like, if I wanted to add 5 plus 3i and 7 minus 2i, I would just add them, like, obviously, like 5 plus 7 is like totally 12, and 3i plus -2i is just totally 1i, or like that. So that's how you add them together, okay? And like, you subtract them totally the same way, and you get like -2 and plus 5i, I think. But multiplying them is a little weird because it's like FOIL, right? And like, totally go learn how to FOIL if you don't already. Come on. Anyway, oh my God, are you still watching this video? This is ridiculous. All right, so FOIL, you go like, okay, first is 35, and then outside it would be like -10i, and then like inside would be plus 21i, and then like outside again would be like minus 6i squared, right? Well, so 35, this is going to be, like, I simplify that term, like 35 plus 11i, right? Like combined like terms. But then here's the trippy part, right? Oh, my pen, hello, I said 6i squared. So what's I squared? Well, I squared is -1. So I have to put the negative, just replace the I squared with -1. Well, then it becomes like, I'm going to use a different color to show you this. This is so crazy. This is like -6 times -1, which means it's like minus -6, which is like just +6. So now, like, I've got, I can combine another like term. So my final answer is 41 plus 11i. Do you get it? Like, isn't that crazy? And even crazier is the way you divide them. I'm gonna pause it and do all the work, and then I'll show you, okay? Okay, so like, the trick is, like, okay, you want to get it all into one a plus bi, right? But you've got two of them, and like, it's not like they divide it evenly. So here's, okay, maybe you remember the trick. Totally, just check it out. It has to do with this word called conjugate. A conjugate is like, a conjugate of x plus 7 is x minus 7, and so on. Anyway, when you multiply a conjugate, like, those middle terms totally cancel out, and like, remember that I squared term is like a -1, so this is minus -1 or plus 1. So like, the trick whenever you have this is you multiply the denominator by its conjugate, and so you get like a total number, right? Like totally 50, which is like weird, but the only pain is that then you have to multiply the top also. So that's kind of a lot of work, but you get like that, which is like 38 plus 16i, and then like, you just take the 50 out of both, and you get like 38/50ths I, which like simplifies to over, oh, hang on. Oh my God, I'm totally out of time. I hope you get it. Let me know if you have questions.